Willy, thank you so much for coming out and just being willing to share about your life and some of your experiences.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Great to have you. Yeah, so, we're going to be talking about a fairly heavy topic and your experience of abuse. And the statistics are pretty alarming in how many people have experienced abuse in all varieties, but particularly sexual abuse. Seems to be a very common experience, sadly, for a lot of people. And so, yeah, your story, as I've heard it, it's been powerful and encouraging, and just where you've come from and where God's brought you. And so why don't you just start by sharing a bit about where it all began and kind of your experience of abuse as a child?
Sure. Yeah, I grew up in a good home, solid home, immigrant home, Christian home. So home life was very stable, very calm. My sisters are 8 and 10 years older than I am. So my middle sister, right after high school, she went off to Europe to go to Bible school, met a guy there, and so they came back to Canada, got married pretty shortly. So, having 2 older sisters, I'm like, great, I get the brother I never had, who was 10 years older than me, I guess. So excited about that. And yeah, shortly thereafter, he ended up being the brother I wish I never met. He started to abuse me so it's probably, it was kind of a grooming. That's one word you often hear in abuse is grooming, how someone draws you in. So his style of abuse, if you want to call it that, would have been it wasn't predatory. It wasn't evil in the sense of threats or physical harm in terms of threatening violence. It was more, I'm trying to figure stuff out and wondering about alcohol, wondering about cigarettes, so he'd be happy to provide that stuff, or, starting to move down that road. And so he was a master manipulator.
Right.
And operated in that style.
Trying to win you over rather than threaten you.
Exactly. Yeah, there was no threats. It was very much try and win you over, and then, once abuse starts, shame does its thing. And this is the early 1970s. So no one's talking about it. Nothing of a sexual nature is getting talked about at church or really anywhere else, hardly.
Yeah, like there's no social media, there's no Me Too movement, it's just keep it under wraps.
Yeah, so, you, as you're going through that, you're convinced you're the only one. You're not going to tell anybody. And because you're a male, being abused by a male, that creates its own confusion. Because the body is brainless, so it responds to stimuli it doesn't discern. It just responds.
It doesn't always align with your values or convictions or beliefs.
No. So that gets confusing. And you're in a Christian culture that doesn't talk about sex to begin with.
Okay, yeah.
So whatever you've learned, it's pretty much off the street.
Right.
Back then, youth groups weren't talking about it, or schools, not like now,
Yeah.
So you have this vacuum, and every vacuum is filled with truth or lies or whatever, but it's filled.
Yeah.
So all that stuff's going on. And now, fortunately for me, I was able to stop it. So there was no intervention other than I just went, that's it. No more. So thankfully, my memory's hazy. I'm glad there's things I don't remember.
Yeah.
It's a gift. But it was probably about a 2-year period of abuse, something like that, junior high-ish.
Okay, yeah.
Just mass confusion. on so many levels, and these roller coaster of emotions, and from fear to hate to shame to sexual curiosity, lust or whatever tied to that. There's just tons of things. Plus, you're in puberty. You're just entered puberty, so all that is happening anyway.
Right.
Yeah, so it's just a mental mess,
Yeah.
mental and emotional mess.
Well, and your heart's desire for an older brother who you could connect with, and then that all being conflated in the confusion.
Yeah, that all blew up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then you live in silence for a bunch of years.
Yeah. And so when you did put an end to it, was there any sort of immediate repercussions for him, or was it just kind of like it started between the two of you, it ended between the two of you, and you just kind of moved on like it didn't happen?
Yeah, it was the latter.
Yeah.
So it was pretty quiet.
Right.
Again, I didn't want anybody to know.
Yeah.
Which he could bank on.
Right. Yeah, he didn't need to try and cover anything up because he knew it wasn't going to get out anyways.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's the last thing you want anybody to know.
Right. Yeah, especially as a, teenage boy.
Yeah.
Just like trying to assert your manliness and all that, and that's kind of the antithesis of manliness to someone in that situation.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
what were some of the immediate kind of ramifications for yourself that you noticed from this period of abuse? Like what was sort of the challenges that came up right away?
Yeah, I think a couple of things when I think back that started manifesting. Just on a broad level, there's just a social insecurity. It's almost like, because partly you're sitting there wondering, am I gay? Am I straight? Am I, like you're going through that deal. So you're probably trying to act more manly than even quote unquote normal.
Right.
Whatever that is.
Yeah, that's a whole nother segment. What is normal?
Yeah, exactly.
No one knows.
So you have that going on. On one hand, you're dealing with some issues with porn and those things, which back then they weren't as accessible as today.
Right.
Probably a good thing.
Yeah. Saving grace of sorts.
Yeah, but it's still, it's still in your head a lot. But you're insecure around guys, you're insecure around girls because of some of that. And so there's the insecurity with guys, and then with girls, because it's like, well, I want to, in my world, make sure I'm not gay. So, almost always had a girlfriend. And looking, like I couldn't articulate this back then, but I think was the security blanket.
Right.
Right? It's trying to reaffirm manhood.
Yeah.
Or as part of that. So you have crazy emotions, you have insecurity around guys, wondering if, someone suspects something. It's that sense of you feel naked.
Yeah, right.
Even though reality is nobody's thinking about you.
Yeah.
Because they're too self-absorbed.
And you have this deep secret to hide, and if a guy makes a passing comment or joke about you, you're like, wait, does he know something?
Yeah. And back then there were lots of gay jokes and
right,
which was typical back then.
Yeah, political correctness wasn't really a thing back then.
No, zero.
Yeah.
So that's happening, then you're trying to, maintain a girlfriend because then you feel good about yourself, which of course doesn't help any relationship because they're a means to an end.
Totally, yeah.
So that's bad news.
The foundation of it is just
it's not
flawed.
Good.
Yeah.
And and spiritually, I really wasn't anywhere other than, because it was what seemed like a moralistic kind of world I was in, and I was in a Christian school too.
Oh, okay.
Starting in grade 8.
Okay. Yeah.
So moralism, and a lot of preaching that I remember. I don't know what was preached, but my version of it was tied to. Correct morals. And so you got guilt around that stuff. You've got, so you're feeling guilty a lot. No understanding of relationship with Jesus or any of that kind of stuff. That came later.
Right.
But lots of guilt, lots of unworthiness,
Yeah.
lots of trying to prove yourself and trying too hard, that kind of thing,
Yeah.
which just makes things worse.
Yeah.
Socially, that just makes things worse.
Yeah. You're being driven by something unhealthy to try and do things that are good, and you're just, kind of the wrong foundation.
Yeah. Yeah. So it created all kinds of mayhem. But, to some degree, well, two things. One, on one hand, you go, oh, that's teenage life to one level.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, having immigrant parents, wonderful as they were, I mean, at the age I was at, they would have been running for their lives. And, my parents both lost their dad when they were in separate towns in the Ukraine, but they were 9 years old when the Soviets killed their fathers, or took away their fathers. And then you had all the run up to World War II and all the chaos around that. And then when you're, 15, 16, 17, the German army comes in and they take you kind of as refugees because you're German.
Right.
Now you're in refugee camps so they're oblivious to North American life because they're just trying to put a roof over your head, give the kids what they didn't have.
Yeah.
And they did a great job of that. So I can't blame them for anything. But you realize, looking back, I mean, their worlds were completely different. And in retrospect, you go, well, my issues compared to their issues are nothing. Like, I'm not running for my life. I'm not, worried about my parents being killed. I'm not, like, they lost everything. So you have this disconnect.
Yeah.
And they have no idea what it's like to grow up in the city.
Right.
So it's just, they just don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
And I remember like getting introduced to, I remember guys at school, actually it was a senior high guy at the Christian school who was a coach, I think for volleyball, who, after school there's several of us and we're out drinking with the guy who's giving us alcohol, and you're grade 9 or something. And
yeah.
So you have that going on as well. And
yeah.
And to some degree you're trying to fit in, but you're also trying to medicate.
Yeah.
All this turmoil.
Right. In the midst of all that turmoil, because you were kind of going through it alone to a degree, is there something that you wish someone could have done or said to you that would have helped you in the midst of that?
Oh yeah. I mean, if I would have had any frame of reference to go, this is not okay, that would have helped. If there would have been anyone who said, hey, whether it's I've been through this or you need to talk if this is your experience, or that really truly I would have seen as safe. I think that would have been massive.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't, whether it was at school or at church or somewhere. But yeah, there was none of those things.
Right.
So the isolation just kind of gets piled on.
Yeah.
And a picture of God, like you go through that at that age, and with a moralistic understanding of, behave correctly, whatever that means. Well, I behaved incorrectly. So what do I do with that?
Right.
So where's God in that? Now the one thing I never did, is I never blamed God for it. Like, that was never a part of the story.
Interesting.
Yeah, some people, they get caught there.
Yeah.
And
totally.
for years.
It's very common.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, it was like, no, this is him, not him.
Right.
Right, it's him.
Yeah.
This jerk made some choices here. And later on, I mean, God was definitely my rescuer in so many ways.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I never blame God. And I didn't really blame other people either. That sort of came later as you get an awareness and you realize, hey, nobody protected me. Nobody, I don't know if they knew or not, or what they knew or suspected, but so that was a whole nother thing to deal with later on.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, thanks for sharing that. At what point did it eventually come out that this had happened and this guy was actually responsible for?
Yeah. So a couple of things happened. 18 years old, intervention by the Holy Spirit. I end up at Bible school as a non-Christian or as a religious person.
Right.
However you want to describe
Someone
that.
who's interested in Christianity
Yeah.
or feels there's something there to explore.
I mean, I grew up in church, went to the Christian school and all that stuff, and probably made some professions as a little kid. You know, and back then there was the junior high. There was Thief in the Night, which was the precursor to Left Behind.
Okay. Sounds
So
terrifying.
It was. I still have a memory of a guillotine in the movie.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because of that would happen after the rapture and the persecution in that model of theology. And so I think I probably went, and so I remember going to the movie, and I think there was an altar call, probably went forward and...
Wow. An altar call at the movie?
Yeah, because
Wow.
a private screening kind of thing.
It's a whole nother world.
Yeah, and so I think I was saved for 6 weeks till it wore off.
Yeah.
Fear only lasts so long.
Totally. They're like, nah, partying and all this
that's
stuff
right.
is way more
I'm
fun.
okay now.
Yeah.
I guess he's not coming back this week, so I'm good.
Yeah.
And you know, at that junior high, your memory's pretty short.
Yeah. It's a cool thought, but that's about it.
So yeah, so after high school, I supernatural intervention, which I understood what happened later, and once I understood what the Holy Spirit was, ended up at Bible school, got saved. Long story short there. Came home for Christmas, because I was going to school in Colorado. Came home for Christmas, and my brother-in-law's still around at the time. So we got a family reunion, which was always bad news and tense. And usually when he walked in the door, my fist clenched. And even though no one knew, I was just like, okay, just give me one good reason, like even close. I'm bigger than he is anyway. I'm going to drop him.
Yeah.
He walks in the room, and I'm not angry. And I'm like, what is going on?
Wow.
And I realized, actually, I feel sorry for him. And this compassion,
Yeah.
which is crazy.
Yeah.
And at points, so my sister knew there was stuff, well, she knew that he struggled with homosexuality.
Okay.
That part she knew. And she knew early on, I think, in their marriage,
Okay.
because stuff that was happening. And at points, she would call me up to go with her to go check out the gay bars in Winnipeg and see if his car was there or like things like that. So I would do that. And yeah, so there's all kinds of stuff going on just with that issue and my sister. And at one point, my parents found out he was gay, and the way the church dealt with things back then, it became a public thing. And my dad's, you know, it was sort of like supposed to be this one and done, like this public confession, and now it's fixed because of lack of understanding.
Right.
And I remember my dad had the family together at one point and said to my brother-in-law, okay, you will stop this. And that was going to be the end of it, which now we would laugh at.
Yeah.
But you think about the frame of reference, and there was none,
Right.
other than this is wrong.
Yeah. It has to come to an end. I mean, it already had come to an end technically, but like.
Yeah. So that's kind of going on. I'm 25 years old. Yeah, about there, working for Youth for Christ. I'm at a speaking event, training in Colorado. I think it was YMCA of the Rockies. I think it's where this happened, which was actually just a couple of miles from where I went to Bible school. And with another friend who was also working at YFC, and we're at the same training event. And so I told him. That's the first time I told anybody.
Okay.
Not long thereafter, someone else had reported my brother-in-law. So he turns himself in to the police said you can turn yourself in. He was a teacher.
Okay.
And he had abused multiple students. Or he was also a music teacher, like private lessons.
Right.
And so he had abused several people. Somebody turned him in. He actually called me to go to the police station with him to turn himself in. And I did. And long story short, he didn't fight it, so he got no trial. He gets sentenced. So back then, you got sentenced for 2 years less a day for being a pedophile, but you serve 3 months. Which, it was a joke. Actually, it's still a joke.
Yeah.
Typically what happens, considering, what you do get thrown in jail for and what you don't.
Yeah.
And our children are not well protected.
Yeah.
And went to visit him in prison and that stuff. And then I ended up moving away to be an intern. And haven't lived back in Winnipeg since.
Okay.
So I moved away and became an intern, and then I got married and whatnot. So that process of people learning, our family discovering, and even then it's interesting because there's members of my family who were told, and it's how God builds defense mechanisms, they blocked it out. So when stuff came out a couple of years later on with prison and whatnot, and I said, well, I told you this. And they're like, no, you didn't. And my wife, Gwen, she's like, yeah, you did. I'm like, am I off? And she's like, no, you did. I said, okay, I thought I did.
Yeah, she's like, I was there, I saw.
Yeah, so there is a way God protects us. That's why some abuse victims don't remember anything.
Right.
That's the grace of God.
Right.
It's like he built us in ways where the brain can lock stuff out so we can actually handle it.
Yeah.
So I actually had family members who did that, which was a little, that gets weird later on when stuff comes out or people remember things or to have an accurate memory is really hard.
Right.
Really hard. Yeah, so all this stuff started coming out then as an adult. And and everybody in the family reacts differently, right? And now in my case, thankfully, everyone believed me.
Okay.
Because it didn't come out through me in that sense.
Yeah.
So
right.
I didn't go through that phase. Like some people, they go, well, who do we believe? The dad or the kid or the, whoever.
Yeah.
That wasn't an issue.
Yeah. It wasn't just a bunch of hearsay and taking sides. It was like, there's a legal sentence.
Yeah. But what I would say is people didn't know what to do with it. So, I had a family member, that said, well, why'd you let him do that to you? And I'm like, are you serious?
Yeah.
I'm, 12 years old?
Yeah.
And you're going to ask me that question?
Yeah.
And part of it, again, was back then the lack of information. They've apologized since. But it's there's a lot of ways we can re-victimize the victim. And one of the ways is you don't believe their story or you don't take it seriously or you try and make them complicit.
Right.
So a classic thing, with women this would happen, you dress too provocatively. Well, maybe, but that still doesn't give anyone the right to abuse you. That's more like a parenting or a good friend conversation about, you may want to dress less provocatively but that's actually, you're illustrating other issues in that person's life.
Yeah.
Right? If they have issues with why they're dressing that way.
Yeah.
But that's no reason to mistreat someone.
Yeah. And or to take responsibility for being mistreated.
No, that's such twisted thinking.
Yeah.
To say somehow I'm justified to act out my messed up, sinful, broken self, because your clothes were too tight or whatever. No.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's like no, and no.
Yeah. Never, ever, ever an appropriate way to approach it.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's, everyone's journey is different in how this stuff comes out. So mine was slow. Mine was years later.
Yeah.
My processing was as an adult, not as a kid.
Right.
In terms of any kind of healthy processing.
Yeah.
In fact, when I was no one knew till I was into my 20s.
Right.
Nobody knew.
And for yourself, you said that there was a key part of the journey was at 18, this encounter with the Holy Spirit, going to Bible college. What role did you see God playing in that process of you becoming free from hating your brother-in-law.
Yeah, I mean, that was, all I can describe there is it was miraculous. Like, it's like he took this anger and hate capsule and just plucked it out of me. Because I have no process I can think of it. It was gone.
Right.
It was like a gift of salvation. As spiritual as that sounds,
Right.
that's what it was.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
What was a process was now learning how to live and how to think and how to think about sex in a healthy way, how to do relationships more healthy, how to deal with my identity, how to deal with my brokenness. Those things, I'm still learning, but those things were a journey.
Yeah.
You know, it's a bit like, you know, you break your leg and you're in a cast and your muscles atrophy and now you got to learn how to walk again. It's kind of like one of those things.
Yeah.
The other piece would be I was robbed of the normal process of discovering and learning about your sexuality.
Right.
I was robbed of appropriate male relationship. My dad's a great dad. Back when I was when I was younger, you know, he was your classic, let's give our kids what we didn't have, working like crazy, stoic, Eastern, you know, German, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So wonderful, but a little distant, especially emotionally. You know, we always joked, you know, Dad's really mad, his eyebrow went up a quarter inch. He's ticked, let's, you know.
That's awesome.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, voices were never raised in our home,
Right.
unless it was me,
Yeah.
you know, as a teenager.
Yeah.
And even that was pretty rare.
Yeah.
So you have that, and then you have abuse. So now it's like you go, okay, what's normal, emotional, relational bonding? Like what does that actually look like? And back then we didn't do much hugging. You know, our church didn't, our home did. Like, it just wasn't part of that world. Actually, I learned how to hug a guy probably at Bible school.
Yeah.
Because we're people from all over the world, and
Yeah.
so you have different cultures, and some people just are huggers, and
Receiving that first hug, you're like,
ah!
what do I do with this?
Yeah, totally. You know,
Yeah.
and so you actually go, oh, okay, there are people do this, and it's not, and actually, and it was a small school, 50, 60 kids, so you get tight, and you actually learn, you know, kind of the whole biblical word of brother and sister in Christ. Like, that whole thing started to click, other than a word.
Right.
You know,
Kind of living it out.
yeah, like, what is that actually?
Yeah.
So I had to learn those things, and especially once I started having kids, because I got all boys.
Right.
Now, my fear in my life, you know, a lot of people have been who are abusers, were abused. Very high percentage.
Yeah.
It's generational. I was never worried about abusing my kids. I'm just like, no, you know, that ends here. That's the beauty of when the Bible talks about your sins go to the third and fourth generation. Sounds bad, but it also says the blessings go for 1,000. So third and fourth generation usually for most families are alive at the same time. So you can actually deal with sin while everyone's alive. You have the opportunity.
Yeah.
And you get to say, this stops here.
Right.
This will not continue. And my brother-in-law was abused by a farmhand Sunday school teacher or something like that. Like so it would have been almost like it wasn't a family member, but it would have been an older.
Yeah, trusted member of the community,
exactly.
religious authority figure.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, okay, this ends here. But I remember when I had a kid, I was in seminary, and you got free counseling in seminary. Okay, let's go do this. I'm like, and my question to the counselor was, okay, what's normal again for a dad? Like, what's normal affection? What's normal? Because I'm trying to figure out being a dad to boys.
Right, and you want to have healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
Because you were never modeled healthy boundaries,
Yeah.
and you experienced someone grossly violating what could have been healthy.
Yeah, but I didn't want to withhold affection.
which is what some people retreat to, I guess.
Exactly. Well, safety first, right?
Yeah.
And and then have some. So I went to counseling for that, and I looked for good role models. They wouldn't know why, but, well, they wouldn't even maybe have known they were role models. I just watched them
Right.
because they had boys.
Yeah.
And found some great ones. And so now, because when you're abused, if you've lost the natural process of your sexual development, relational development, so whether you're abused by the same sex or the opposite sex, that's messed up. So now you have to be trained in it because your natural way of learning is gone and you can't take it back. So now it's almost like, like when you're learning how to walk as an adult, like if you've had an accident, it's incredibly methodical.
Yeah.
There's nothing intuitive about it.
Yeah.
Not like a little kid learning how to walk,
Right.
who, where they slowly figure it out and will fall over a bit and
Yeah, wobble around.
yeah, it's not that. It's very mechanical and you actually overthink it at first. Same thing.
Okay.
It's like, what's the right thing? Oh yeah, I learned the right thing to do in this situation is this. And you do it, and after a while it becomes natural.
Right. Yeah.
But at first it's not.
Yeah.
It all feels weird.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's why
You can't expect it to feel natural.
No.
It can't be a feeling-driven thing.
No.
You just have to know.
an abused woman will, because of the pain associated with the abuse, will often marry an emotionally distant man. Because that's safe. Nothing is being asked emotionally.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, I can handle that,
Right.
right? And we will always marry someone who is safe, whether we know it or not. And that's true no matter how healthy we are. Like part of, I feel comfortable with this person, you could say, I feel safe with this person. Even the child of an alcoholic who marries an alcoholic, and you look at that and you go, that's nuts. They actually know how to do that because they are the child of an alcoholic. So to them, it actually feels safe.
Right.
As twisted as that sounds.
Yeah, like I can handle this.
Yeah.
Unlike other issues that I might not be able to handle, at least I can handle an
Yeah.
alcoholic.
Oh yeah, they can't handle a healthy person.
Right.
That actually feels dangerous. They're going to ask things of me I can't perhaps give or don't know how, even if I want to.
Right.
They'll self-sabotage that relationship.
Yeah.
So I had to go through that learning process of, how do I do that? And even, it's hard to say what's personality and what's got derailed.
Yeah.
Because there are points where I know I can be emotionally, I don't know if distance the right word or very contained. And I mean, the good part is in a crisis, I'm very level.
You're the guy to go to. Everyone's freaking out. You're just like,
Yeah, I'm not gonna freak out. My wife is not like that. A few months ago, we're driving down the number 1, coming from Chilliwack, coming this way, coming home, and there's a semi in front of us that's all over the road. And it looked like he's either fallen asleep or he's a drunk driver. And we're the car right behind him. We can't get by. And he's going shoulder to shoulder.
wow.
My wife's freaking.
Yeah.
Every time he swerves, she yells.
Yeah.
And I'm like, call 911.
Yeah.
But she's screaming to it. I'm like, give me the phone. Let me call 911. And so I'm talking to the police finally, saying, yeah, we're following the semi. This is where we are. This is the turnoff. This is what's happening. And then actually the highway curves, and he thankfully didn't. Off the road into the ditch with full semi.
Whoa. Wow.
And till finally he stopped there.
Yeah.
And I'm describing this to the So, but the other side of me sometimes goes, I realize in retrospect, I probably should have been more emotional about that than I was.
Right.
Right? And I go, I wonder what that's about.
Right.
Or if you've been abused, abuse is always about power. And your power meter is out of whack when you get abused. So the extremes would be, on one end, you have the abused child who becomes, say, a prostitute, because they go, I'm not good for anything. So it's like they give away power, or the only way I'm good or useful is through sex, or I get power through sex even. That kind of thing. The other extreme is they become like a vigilante. They become the social worker or the lawyer who's going to stop all abuse everywhere in the world.
Right.
And every comment, every joke is a power issue. They're hypersensitive. So now you go, okay, well, how do I find, quote unquote, the normal between these two extremes? What's the normal part of this meter?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So again, you got to train yourself.
Yeah.
You got to find ways to be trained. And healing that's part of the healing process.
It's kind of finding what that.
Yeah, you self-calibrate.
Right.
But if something's happening and I'm in a meeting, say, and something happens and it really gets me and I'm getting heated, but no one else in the room is, and I'm like, okay, that tension or that issue or that misuse of power is a level 3, but I'm feeling a level 7 out of 10. And over time, you can start recognizing that in yourself, and you're going, okay, this is tapping into something deeper.
Right.
I need to do some reflection.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And that's still, to this day, it happens less, but it'll still happen.
And you're more aware of it now, I guess, too.
Yeah, usually I can catch it sooner.
Rather than acting on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can catch it sooner, or, but it's that ongoing journey of, okay, how do I figure out normal in these different areas of my life? How do I become a fully engaged person?
Yeah.
Given this place of safety, right? You pull back for safety.
Yeah, it requires you accessing those deeply damaged areas of your emotional life or inner life that it's easier to withdraw from them. But to become a fully engaged person, it's like you have to go there, deal with those pains so that those things can become healthy and you can be more fully orbed.
Yeah, the Dan Allender is a great counselor. He's written on abuse a fair bit, a couple of books, and that I found incredibly helpful. But one of the things that he said that really struck me, he said, it's not that abused people have issues that people have not been abused don't have. It's that we all have similar issues. It's just our story makes some issues more heightened for some people because of the pain they've experienced. So it's not you have the issue or you don't.
Yeah.
It's a spectrum.
Right.
And when I read that, I went, oh, that is so helpful. So, everyone's trying to figure out their identity.
Yeah.
Your story changes how that identity search and discovery goes.
Yeah.
So if you've been abused, it has a certain impact. If you never had a father, it has a certain impact. If you never had a mom, it has a certain, so every one of them has just a different trajectory because of your story. I think the other thing that was really quite profound for me, and I don't know where I picked this up, but what really struck me through my faith is my story is not my identity. It's just my story.
Right.
Everyone has a story.
Yeah.
And my past is just my story.
Yeah.
My past does not determine my future. My future is determined by the decisions I make today. And it's up to me what those decisions are. So my future actually sits in my hands today. So I can't actually blame my past for my future.
You're not a victim to your past.
It's just a story.
Yeah.
It's not my identity.
Yeah.
It's my story. Everybody has a story.
Yeah.
And my story has impacted me just like yours has impacted you and everybody else's.
Yeah. And depending on how we tell our stories, it impacts us differently.
Yeah. And so, I'm very sensitive to people who want to play the victim card because it's self-imprisoning. And it can sound cruel when I push back on them doing that,
Right.
but actually it's freedom if they can walk through it.
Right.
Also, it denies the gospel, because Jesus never said, "Oh, you're an abused Christian,"
Right.
or whatever. There's no adjectives
Yeah. Yeah.
for being a Christian,
Yeah.
right? I am a child of God.
Yeah.
Here's my story,
Yeah.
and here's how God met me in my story.
Your story doesn't define your identity.
No,
But
it's just a story.
yeah.
So whenever that clicked for me, and I couldn't tell you when, I just went, oh, well, I can share my story, and my story might help somebody.
Yeah. And it might
And-
even feel uncomfortable sometimes, like in probably the earlier stages of starting
Yeah.
to share your story, might feel almost damaging or painful, but it's actually a part of that healing process of like, oh no, I'm not defined by my story.
Yeah.
And it might still feel a bit weird, but it's actually good to get it out there and help others as I deal with that pain and bring it to God and,
Yeah, the first time it's very emotional,
yeah.
and it can still be emotional from time to time. I go, well, I'm a steward of this story, and if this story helps somebody, it's my obligation to share it appropriately and in timely ways.
Yeah.
And actually, it's really interesting to me when the people who have heard the story are more uncomfortable than I am.
Yeah. Yeah. You're like, okay, got to deal with some stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It tells me something about them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because numerous times or people say, "Oh, you're so brave to tell your story." I go, "No, not real. Like, not that big a deal." But it tells me something about them if that's the words they're using. Because they see it as they're interpreting it through a lens of identity,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And that's even when I talk to people or pray with people. Often I'll use lines like, God forgives you for anything you've done or anything that's been done to you. Because a lot of people feel guilty for what's been done to them,
Yeah.
that they had no authority over. They had
Yeah.
no way of stopping.
Yeah.
But somehow they feel guilty,
Yeah.
which is a lie of Satan.
Yeah. It's just one more way the enemy likes to drive us into the ground.
Totally. So he's always going to say, it's your fault. You brought it on. You should have said no, and you didn't. If you tell anybody, they will shame you. You're going to be embarrassed. You should keep this a secret.
Deep down, you probably wanted it because you're so messed up.
Oh yeah, you're going to get every one of those lines, and in some form at some time.
Yeah.
And that's where identity in Christ is. You rise above your story, if you want to use that language. I mean, it's kind of motivational speak, but
Yeah.
you are bigger than your story,
Yeah.
and your story is still being written every day. And if you give your life to Christ, you're actually having the author of life write your story. And
So good.
nothing is wasted in anyone's story. And it's not that my story has to have this utilitarian purpose.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like we like that because then we go, okay, see, there's something good that's come of this.
Yeah.
But even that's not the point.
Yeah. Yeah. That's nice when it happens.
Yeah,
But it's not.
it's like we feel better. It's redeemed more if something good came out of this.
Yeah.
Okay, now I can see a reason for it. Well, no, the reason it happened is because somebody sinned.
Yeah. Somebody's messed up.
Yeah, that's why it happened.
Yeah.
And God didn't do that so he could use it as an illustration in a sermon.
Yeah.
Like
that's a lot of pain for a very little. Yeah.
Well, that's a very twisted view of God.
Yeah.
But we'll do those things, It's like, oh, now I can help people.
Yeah.
Well, you can help people before.
Yeah.
So it's actually not the point.
Yeah.
The point is we live in a sinful world and people make sinful choices that impact other people.
Yeah.
The drunk driver, the abuser,
Yeah.
the womanizer, like whatever you want to use, the adulterer,
Yeah.
whatever it is, the control freak. Well, we do things in our brokenness that we think will somehow benefit us
Yeah.
in some twisted reality,
Yeah.
right?
And then it's up to us how we respond to it.
Yeah.
Like we can't control whether it happens or not, but we are responsible for how we respond.
Yeah. And for sometimes it does give us a cause, like we go, I went through this, I don't want anybody else to go through this, so I'm going to get involved in protecting children or bringing abusers to justice, or whatever it might be.
Right.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Our causes are all rooted in our life experiences.
Yeah.
For 99% of us.
Yeah.
Somebody we know, every cancer advocate probably had a family member die of cancer.
Yeah.
And so on.
Yeah.
Right. And that's good. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
So.
No, yeah. Thank you for sharing all that. And yeah, just for the sake of time, as we kind of bring things to a close, last question I wanted to ask you was, for all the people watching who either have experienced abuse and are still trying to make sense of it and work through it, or know people, loved ones or friends who have been abused, there is a lot of different pieces of your journey that you've shared in this story, a lot of different sources of help, whether friends, counselors, mentors, but yeah, for people who are wondering, like, how does God fit into this, and how does God even heal us in those ways of the pains that we carry, what would your encouragement be to those people who are trying to understand that?
Yeah, I'd say a couple of things. For me, I very much see as, God rescued me. Like, even the ability to say, this ends here, when I was 12 or 13, whatever I was, I look back and I go, I wasn't following Jesus, but that was a total gift.
Yeah.
So I think people, I would encourage them in a couple of ways. If you haven't given your life to Christ, give it to Him.
Yeah.
Because He redeems our stories and He redeems us. But having a spiritual counselor, whether that's a pastor or a clinical counselor who's a Christian, or a spiritual director, or someone who is walking with us to recalibrate our heart and our mind to understand ourselves in light of who God made us to be and what He calls us to. And that may include repentance, because we've held things against God. It definitely will include repenting of lies that we've given power. Because the only way sin and Satan has power in our lives is because we give it to him.
Yeah.
Right? Because we believe a lie and we start living it.
Yeah.
So to walk through that piece and replace the lies with the truth. So we need someone typically to walk with us in that. Knowing the Bible is great, so you know what the truth is.
Yeah.
But usually we need someone, and sometimes there's, the whole inner healing, kind of like you need to walk through in prayer to go, okay, what's the lie? Confess the lie. What's the truth? Pray the truth, and just keep walking through it. Because we have to take it from knowledge to experience and into our hearts when we go, okay, I'm actually convinced and convicted of this.
Yeah.
So when I say I'm a child of God, it's not just words.
Yeah.
It's not just the right answer.
Yeah. You don't just know it. You feel it.
You're appropriating it.
Yeah.
So there's that piece. Counseling, because you got to learn how to walk in health.
Right.
And to walk in health, you have to recognize what health is and what unhealthy is.
Yeah. And it's more than just spiritual. It's
emotional,
physical, it's all these things.
So there's numerous counselors I've gone to over the years, different stages of life, because you can go through something and you go for counseling, you're 22, you go for counseling and you go, okay, I'm good now. Well, 5 years later, it's coming back and you go, I thought I dealt with that. Well, it's a different phase of life.
Yeah, yeah.
Or usually it's something has caused you to feel out of control. So you're older and now you're getting married. Well, now if you're going to be vulnerable with that person, that's hitting all the buttons of fear, because are they actually safe? So that invite to vulnerability in either really good friendship or a dating relationship, now that person is dangerous. So they're the foil for all this old stuff to come, because now it's a different aspect. You have kids. Well, now you go, I got to protect my kids. Your kid hits the age when you were abused. I've seen so many people go into anxiety and depression because they hit 40 years old. They can't control everything anymore in their lives, especially their children. They've never dealt with their abuse, and it shows up in anxiety and or depression or anger.
Yeah.
Right, all sides of depression. And you start probing a little bit, and you realize they've never worked through this. And now they're looking at their daughter. See, it's most often it's been a daughter or a woman whose daughter is the same age she is when she was abused. And every alarm bell's going.
Yeah.
All of her triggers are being hit.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, you got to stay home. I'm going to homeschool you.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
Yeah.
And now you're driving your children away.
Right.
Because you're afraid, so for their safety, you try and control them. But a kid doesn't know that, so it's just driving them away. You're controlling. You're, right? Or you get married and suddenly you realize, my sex life, because you've just shut down.
Yeah.
And your spouse is like, what are you doing? Like, what's the deal here? Don't you love me? It's all going to come out towards them. Well, now you've got to process things at a whole different level.
Yeah.
Because now you could end up in the same action, but in your brain you're flashing back to the abuse. Because abuse will always have trigger points. And your trigger could be a similar place or action or sound. Or it could be the thing you escape to. So you'll hear stories of, while I was being abused, there was a clock on the wall and I would stare at it.
Yeah.
Well, that clock now can also be a trigger.
Right.
I hear one like it, I see one like it, I'm back there. We all do it at one level. Music's the simplest thing, right? You hear a song from your childhood or a song from your teenage years, and instantly you're there.
Yeah.
You know, the new TELUS ads all have Boston, the band Boston is their backtrack
Okay.
for the TELUS TV ads.
Yeah.
The other day it came on, I said to my wife, oh yeah, 1978.
Yeah.
I can tell exactly where I was.
Yeah.
Listening to Boston.
Powerful memory.
Oh yeah, that's what music does to it. And we all have those at some level.
Right.
With something, a smell, like a certain food,
Yeah.
right? If it's abuser, if it was a guy, cologne, potentially, or right? Or something like that.
Yeah.
So you need counseling to take those things and put them in their right place, talk through them in a safe place. Again, identify lies that we're believing that are being triggered. Identify what to do when we get triggered. Because responses to trauma are instinctive and intuitive. They are not cognitive. Right? It begins in your gut.
Yeah.
You see someone that reminds you of your abuser and you feel something. A couple of years ago, I went to a church service in my friend's church, and then they had a choir and stuff, and the choir conductor was a clone for my abuser, who was also a choir conductor.
Okay. Yeah.
Who did choirs. And so I'm like, oh my goodness, this is, like, I know it's not him,
Yeah.
but everything inside of me is just like going ding, 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 ding.
Yeah.
But it's from my gut.
You can't just be present in the moment. It's like
Yeah.
you're overwhelmed.
Oh yeah,
by
visually, same haircut, same like 1970s haircut, even though this is like 2000 and whatever. Same style of music that he liked. I'm just like, oh my goodness, and in fact, my wife looked and went, oh my. She even could see it,
this. Right.
right? So you're just like, so you got to recognize that. And you just go, okay, it is what it is, but it's in this, I can put it in this box
Yeah.
because I know what it is. I know it's not dangerous.
Yeah.
It's just taking me back there.
Yeah.
And that was painful.
Yeah.
And you go, yeah, that was painful.
Yeah.
Like, you don't need a rational, oh, that was then, you're safe. No, I know that. You know, I don't need rationalization in that moment.
Yeah.
But it's part of the journey.
Yeah. You have to walk through it. You got to process it.
Yep.
Can't suppress it.
No, you just got to go, man, that really triggered me.
Yeah.
Or even if you're watching something, you go, oh, I'm having a flat, that's off. It's not suck it up. That's just stupid.
Right.
Like, that's not how God works.
Yeah.
The other thing, for many people, the perpetrator's been in the family
Right.
and is in the family. Dad, grandpa, uncle, like it gets really tricky. So with the family stuff, you can't say to the person, well, you should forgive, so it's okay to be with them now. You know, you're safe because we're all in the room. I go, that's not for me to determine.
Yeah.
If they don't feel safe, I'm not going to tell them to go there
Yeah.
because that's emotional safety.
Yeah.
It's not physical safety. The tension comes if the victim says, well, you're still talking to the grandpa or uncle or whoever it is, so therefore you're against me. That gets tricky. And there's no easy answer.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, you're victim and perpetrator, we're all still family.
Yeah.
And often, even victims, if it's family, still actually want a relationship with their abuser, because I could have an abuser arrested and lose my dad the same day.
Right. Break the family apart.
So now it's double. Because I still want a dad
Right.
or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So those things, it's case by case, but you got to recognize there's a lot of stuff going on here.
Yeah.
And if someone wants distance, you have to give them distance.
Yeah.
Like you got to let them.
And their safety is paramount.
Yeah. Forgiveness is not, it does not mean we become stupid. Like there's appropriate boundaries. Forgiveness goes, yeah, I forgive you, but you know, in my case, it's like, well, no, my kids are never going to your house.
Yeah.
Like without me there.
Yeah.
Or, you know, you're never going to be alone with my kids. You're never,
Yeah.
like you don't, a simple rule of thumb we always had was if someone that we know was abused, they could come to our home. If I know they haven't worked through it clearly and I know the story, like they would never babysit my kids. They would never be alone with my kids. And it's simply, I'm not going to create an opportunity for anyone.
Yeah.
And they'll go, well, you can trust me. And I'm just like, you know, I don't have to push them on it, but I'm just like, nope, you're not, you haven't worked through it. I don't know what triggers are going on inside of you. And no matter how good you look on the outside, I'm responsible for my kids.
Yeah.
Or I'm responsible to keep this group safe.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to ostracize you, but I will keep the room safe.
Yeah.
Because that's my responsibility.
Yeah.
So, and there's ways to do both. You know, because you want to be gracious, but we're not here to be gullible. And don't mistake God's forgiveness for gullibility. And especially when it's the potential for a minor to be harmed.
Yeah.
I go, no, you know what he says, what Jesus says about children and who harms children. So this is serious stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so get a spiritual counselor, get a clinical counselor,
Yeah.
and get a community that can speak into your life. And it can't just be your spouse if you're married. It's people who know your story and know you well enough who can say, hey, you know what, you're getting awfully angry about a lot of stuff lately. And they don't have to say, you think it was this? But it's just someone, you know, we need that. We all need that. People who are calling us on our stuff in a good way because we know they love us. And it's like, man, you've been agitated lately, or man, you really got uptight about that thing that happened the other day, like much more than anybody else. Like, what do you think?
Yeah.
That's about? Why is that such a big deal?
Yeah.
You know, we need community.
Yeah.
All healing happens in community. And all trauma seeks to isolate.
Yeah.
All addicts isolate. All people who have been traumatized want to isolate, or at least isolate that part of their lives. They might want to be in community but keep that secret.
Yeah.
So I have to find ways. There's transparency and there's vulnerability. Transparency is me telling my story. Which I can do. Like, I don't care who hears it. It doesn't matter to me. It's probably most awkward if my family's in the room. But I've done that too. Vulnerability is when I invite people to speak into my life. I can be transparent without being vulnerable.
Right.
And a lot of people confuse that.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
Totally.
They go, oh, you told your story. That's so vulnerable. Like I told it in a sermon here at church. People say, oh, I said, there's zero vulnerability there.
Mm-hmm.
It's a large crowd. They're not speaking into my life. It's transparent.
You can still keep everyone at arm's
Oh.
length.
In fact, the bigger the crowd, the easier it is.
Yeah.
Because it's a sea.
Yeah.
One-on-one,
Yeah.
that gets tougher.
Yeah.
So transparency is good. Vulnerability with the appropriate people is better.
Yeah. Yeah. Essential.
Yeah. So trusted people, you trust them with your story. They take it all seriously,
Yeah.
and they'll be your friends on a good day and a bad day,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's what Christian community is supposed to be.
Yeah.
Like in those trusted groups, right?
Totally.
So yeah, good friends, spiritual guide and counselor, and clinical help at the points that you need it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, thank you so much. And clearly you have a wealth of wisdom and experience on the matter, and you've spent a lot of time, years, decades, processing it, not only yourself, but also walking with others. And yeah, for anyone watching this who would want to go deeper into it or look into it, we could make your contact available if you'd be willing
Happy to talk to them.
Talk with people. That'd be amazing. Awesome. Well, Willy, thank you for taking the time, for sharing transparently, maybe vulnerably. We'll see. Just kidding. No, I know you're.
Depends
you're
what
an
you say
open
to me
book.
next.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Definitely know that you're an open book, and so really appreciate having you around. That's been huge.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
Awesome.